If you want to gather honey, don't kick over the beehive. On May 7, 1931, New York City witnessed the climax of the most sensational manhunt in its history. After weeks of searching, Gun Crowley, a notorious killer who neither smoked nor drank, was cornered in his sweetheart's apartment on West End Avenue. Trapped on the top floor, 150 police officers and detectives surrounded the building. They broke through the roof, tried smoking him out with tear gas, and even set up machine guns on nearby buildings. For more than an hour, the area echoed with gunfire as Crowley, hiding behind an overstuffed chair, returned fire. A crowd of 10,000 gathered to watch the shootout, an event unlike anything ever seen in the streets of New York. When Crowley was finally captured, Police Commissioner E.P. Mulrooney described him as one of the most dangerous criminals New York had ever faced, stating, "He will kill at the drop of a feather." Yet, Crowley saw himself very differently. While the police shot at him, he wrote a letter, later found covered in his blood, in which he claimed, "Under my coat is a weary heart, but a kind one that would do nobody any harm." Just days earlier, Crowley had been out with his girlfriend on a country road in Long Island. A police officer approached and asked to see his license. Without a word, Crowley shot the officer, and as he lay dying, Crowley took the officer's gun and fired another bullet into him. Yet, this killer still claimed, "Under my coat is a weary heart, but a kind one that would do nobody any harm." Sentenced to the electric chair, Crowley arrived at Sing Sing prison without regret. Instead of reflecting on his crimes, he said, "This is what I get for defending myself." The point of this story is clear. Crowley never blamed himself for anything. Is this unusual among criminals? Not at all. Al Capone, America's most notorious gangster, said, "I have spent the best years of my life giving people the lighter pleasures, helping them have a good time, and all I get is abuse, the existence of a hunted man." Capone did not see himself as a criminal. He viewed himself as a public benefactor, misunderstood and unappreciated. Dutch Schultz, another infamous gangster, also believed he was a public benefactor, even as rival gangsters in Newark shot him down. Similarly, many criminals believe they are the victims of circumstance, rather than perpetrators of wrongdoing. Lewis Laws, the warden of Sing Sing prison for many years, noted that few criminals consider themselves bad people. They rationalize their actions, often convincing themselves that their crimes were justified. Many even believe they should not be in prison at all. If men like Crowley, Capone, and Schultz don't blame themselves, what about ordinary people? John Wanamaker, founder of the famous department stores, once said, "I learned 30 years ago that it is foolish to scold. I have enough trouble overcoming my own limitations without fretting over the fact that God has not seen fit to distribute evenly the gift of intelligence." Wanamaker learned this lesson early, but for most of us, it takes time to realize that people rarely criticize themselves, no matter how wrong they may be. Criticism often backfires. It puts people on the defensive and makes them strive to justify their actions rather than correct them. Criticism is dangerous because it wounds pride, hurts a person's sense of importance, and arouses resentment. B.F. Skinner, a renowned psychologist, proved that animals learn more effectively when rewarded for good behavior than when punished for bad. The same applies to people. Criticism rarely results in positive change and more often leads to resentment. Hans Selye, another psychologist, noted that humans crave approval and dread condemnation. The resentment caused by criticism can demoralize employees, family members, and friends without resolving the issue at hand. George B. Johnston, a safety coordinator for an engineering company in Oklahoma, realized this through his work. Initially, He enforced safety regulations with authority, insisting workers wear hard hats. The result was sullen compliance, and many workers removed their hats as soon as he left. When he switched tactics and approached workers with concern, asking if their hats were uncomfortable, compliance improved without resentment. History is filled with examples of the futility of criticism. Take, for instance, the famous quarrel between Theodore Roosevelt and President Taft, which split the Republican Party and led to the election of Woodrow Wilson. Roosevelt, after supporting Taft's presidency, returned from Africa to denounce him, ultimately forming the Bull Moose Party and nearly destroying the GOP. Despite Roosevelt's harsh criticism, Taft remained unmoved, tearfully stating, "I don't see how I could have done any differently from what I have." Alternatively, consider the Teapot Dome scandal, where Albert B. Fall, Secretary of the Interior, was condemned for leasing government oil reserves in exchange for a personal loan of $100,000. Despite the public outrage and his imprisonment, Fall never admitted guilt. Even his wife insisted he had been betrayed and crucified, rather than acknowledging his wrongdoing. The lesson is simple. Humans are quick to defend themselves, even when clearly at fault. Therefore, when tempted to criticize others, remember Crowley, Capone, and Fall. Criticism often backfires, leading to justification, resentment, or defiance. Abraham Lincoln learned this lesson as well. Early in his life, Lincoln was quick to criticize and ridicule others, even publishing anonymous letters mocking his opponents. However, after one such letter led to a near-fatal duel with James Shields, Lincoln changed his ways. He rarely criticized anyone after that incident. During the Civil War, Lincoln appointed several generals: McClellan, Pope, Burnside, Hooker, Meade, each of whom blundered. While the nation condemned these men, Lincoln remained calm, famously saying, "Judge not, that ye be not judged." When others criticized the Southern people, Lincoln responded, "Don't criticize them. They are just what we would be under similar circumstances." Lincoln had plenty of reason to criticize General Meade after the Battle of Gettysburg, when Meade let General Lee's army escape. Furious, Lincoln wrote a letter condemning Meade's inaction, but he never sent it. He realized that sending the letter would only cause resentment and would not change anything. Instead, Lincoln's leadership was marked by understanding and empathy. He knew that criticism often fails to produce results. Theodore Roosevelt, when facing difficult decisions as president, often looked at a portrait of Lincoln and asked himself, what would Lincoln do? Mark Twain, like many, struggled with his temper. He often wrote scathing letters, but his wife quietly removed them from the mail, understanding that these angry outbursts would only cause harm. If you want to improve someone, begin with yourself. As Confucius said, "Don't complain about the snow on your neighbor's roof when your own doorstep is unclean." Benjamin Franklin, once tactless and sharp-tongued, became so adept at handling people that he was appointed American ambassador to France. His secret? "I will speak ill of no man," he said, "and speak all the good I know of everybody." Criticism is easy, but understanding requires patience, character, and self-control. As Carlyle said, "A great man shows his greatness by the way he treats little men." Bob Hoover, a famous test pilot, faced a near-death experience when both engines of his plane stopped mid-flight. Through skillful maneuvering, he managed to land safely, although the plane was severely damaged. Upon inspection, Hoover discovered that the mechanic had mistakenly fueled the plane with jet fuel instead of gasoline. The mechanic was devastated, knowing he had endangered Hoover's life and destroyed an expensive plane. However, instead of criticizing or reprimanding the mechanic, Hoover put his arm around him and said, "To show you I'm sure you'll never do this again, I want you to service my F-51 tomorrow." Hoover understands, and forgiveness turned a mistake into a learning opportunity, without creating resentment. Parents, too, often feel the urge to criticize their children. Instead of admonishing them, it can be more effective to express empathy and patience. A classic example of this is the essay Father Forgets by W. Livingston Learned, which reflects on the importance of understanding over criticism. Father forgets. Listen, son, I am saying this as you lie asleep. One little hand crumpled under your cheek, and the blonde curls sticky on your damp forehead. I have crept into your room alone. Just a few minutes ago, as I sat reading my paper in the library, a stifling wave of remorse swept over me. Guiltily, I came to your bedside. There are the things I was thinking, son. I had been cross to you. I scolded you when you were getting dressed for school because you gave your face merely a dab with a towel. I took you to task for not cleaning your shoes. I called out angrily when you threw some of your things on the floor. At breakfast, I found fault too. You spilled things, you gulped down your food, you put your elbows on the table, and you spread butter too thick on your bread. When you were leaving to play, you turned and waved, saying, "Goodbye, Daddy." And I frowned and said in return, "Hold your shoulders back." Then it began again in the afternoon, when I came home. I found you playing on the ground with holes in your stockings. I humiliated you before your friends by marching you back to the house. Do you remember later, when you timidly came to me, a hurt look in your eyes? When I snapped, "What is it you want?" you said nothing but threw your arms around me and kissed me, then ran away. Your spontaneous affection hit me deeply. I came to your bedside tonight to make amends. Tomorrow, I will be a real father. I will be patient. I will laugh when you laugh and suffer when you suffer. I will remind myself constantly, he is only a little boy. This touching essay resonates with parents because it captures a universal truth. Often, we criticize because we forget the youth and vulnerability of our children. As adults, we sometimes impose expectations that are far too high, forgetting the importance of patience and understanding. Instead of condemning others, we should try to understand them. Let us figure out why people do what they do. This approach is far more rewarding and promotes empathy, tolerance, and kindness. To know all is to forgive all. Dr. Samuel Johnson once said, "God himself, sir, does not propose to judge man until the end of his days." So, why should we? The big secret of dealing with people. There is only one way, under the vastness of the heavens, to get anyone to do anything. Have you ever paused to reflect on that? Yes, just one way. That is by making the other person want to do it. You must remember, there is no other way. Of course, you can force someone to hand over their watch by thrusting a revolver into their ribs. You can also compel your employees to cooperate by threatening to fire them, though this will only work as long as you are watching. You could even force a child to obey with a whip or a threat. However, these rough methods often have severe and undesirable consequences. The only real way to get someone to do anything is by offering him or her what he or she want. However, what exactly do people want? Sigmund Freud asserted that everything we do arises from two basic motivations: the sex drive and the desire for greatness. John Dewey, one of America's deepest thinkers, phrased it a little differently. He said that the deepest desire in human nature is the desire to feel important. Remember that phrase, the desire to feel important. It holds great significance, and you will hear much about it as you read on. What do you want? Not a great many things, but the few things you do want, you desire with an intensity that will not be denied. Some of the most common human desires include 1. Health and the preservation of life. 2. Food. 3. Sleep. 4. Money and the things that money can buy. 5. Life after death. 6. Sexual satisfaction. 7. The well-being of our children. 8. A sense of importance. Most of these desires are typically fulfilled, except one. There is, however, one longing that is almost as deep and urgent as the need for food or sleep, and that is rarely satisfied. Freud called it the desire to be great. Dewey called it the desire to feel important. Lincoln once began a letter by stating, "Everybody likes a compliment." William James said, "The deepest principle in human nature is the craving to be appreciated." Notice that he did not use the word wish, desire, or longing to be appreciated. He called it a craving. This is a deep, unrelenting human hunger, and the rare individual who can satisfy this hunger will hold people in their grasp, and even the undertaker will be sorry when they die. The desire to feel important is one of the most significant differences between humankind and the animal kingdom. To illustrate this, consider my experience as a young boy growing up on a farm in Missouri. My father bred Duroc Jersey hogs and pedigreed white-faced cattle. We used to display our hogs and cattle at county fairs and livestock shows across the Midwest, winning numerous first-place prizes. My father would proudly display his blue ribbons on a sheet of white muslin, and when visitors came to our home, he would unfurl the muslin sheet, with me holding one end and him the other, to exhibit the ribbons. The hogs did not care about those ribbons, but my father certainly did. Those prizes gave him a sense of importance. If our ancestors had not possessed this powerful drive for a sense of importance, civilization would have been impossible. Without it, we would still be like animals. It was this desire for importance that led an impoverished, uneducated grocery clerk to study law books he found at the bottom of a barrel of household goods he had purchased for 50 cents. You may have heard of this clerk. His name was Lincoln. It was this same desire that inspired Charles Dickens to write his enduring novels, that moved Sir Christopher Wren to design his architectural masterpieces, that motivated Rockefeller to amass fortunes he never spent, and that prompted the wealthiest family in your town to build a house much too large for their needs. This desire is also what drives many young people to join gangs and engage in criminal activities. E.P. Mulrooney, a former police commissioner of New York, noted that young criminals are often filled with ego, and their first request after arrest is to see the lurid newspapers that glorify them. The daunting prospect of prison seems distant, so long as they can revel in the attention they receive. If you tell me how you get your sense of importance, I can tell you what kind of person you are. This is the most important thing about you. For example, John D. Rockefeller gained his sense of importance by donating funds to build a modern hospital in Peking, China, to care for millions of people he would never meet. Dillinger, on the other hand, derived his importance from being a bandit, a bank robber, and a killer. When FBI agents were chasing him, he proudly told a farmer, "I'm Dillinger." He was thrilled to be public enemy number one. Yes, the only difference between Rockefeller and Dillinger was how they sought their feeling of importance. History is filled with fascinating examples of people striving for this sense of importance. Even George Washington wanted to be called His Mightiness, the President of the United States. Columbus begged for the title Admiral of the Ocean and Viceroy of India. Catherine the Great refused to open letters unless they were addressed to Her Imperial Majesty. Mrs. Lincoln once lashed out at Mrs. Grant, shouting, "How dare you be seated in my presence until I invite you?" Our wealthiest citizens helped finance Admiral Byrd's 1928 expedition to the Antarctic, with the understanding that icy mountain ranges would be named after them. Victor Hugo aspired to rename the city of Paris in his honor. Even Shakespeare, one of the greatest writers of all time, sought a coat of arms for his family to elevate their status. Some people even feign illness to gain sympathy and attention. Consider Mrs. McKinley, who demanded that her husband, President William McKinley, neglect important affairs of state to sit beside her for hours at a time, soothing her to sleep. She insisted that he stay with her during dental appointments and once created a stormy scene when he had to leave her alone for a meeting with his Secretary of State. Mary Roberts Rinehart once told me about a young woman who became an invalid to gain attention. One day, Mrs. Rinehart said, "This woman had to confront her age, and the long, lonely years stretched before her with nothing left to look forward to. She took to her bed, and for 10 years, her elderly mother climbed up and down 3 flights of stairs, nursing her. Then, one day, the mother, worn out by her duties, died. For weeks, the invalid languished, but eventually, she got up, dressed, and resumed her life." Some experts claim that people may even go insane to find, in the fantasy world of madness, the feeling of importance that reality has denied them. In the United States, more people suffer from mental illness than from all other diseases combined. What causes insanity? No one can definitively answer such a broad question. However, we do know that certain diseases, such as syphilis, destroy brain cells and cause insanity. In fact, about half of all mental illnesses can be attributed to physical causes, such as brain lesions, alcohol, toxins, and injuries. However, the other half, this is the shocking part, have no apparent physical cause. When autopsies are performed, their brain tissues are found to be as healthy as yours or mine. Why, then, do these people go insane? I once asked the head physician of a prominent psychiatric hospital, a man who had earned numerous honors for his expertise, this very question. He admitted that no one really knows why people go insane. However, he noted that many people who lose their sanity find in madness a sense of importance they could not achieve in the real world. He shared a story to illustrate this point. "I have a patient whose marriage was a disaster. She longed for love, children, and social prestige, but life crushed her dreams. Her husband despised her and refused even to eat with her. She had no children and no social standing. Eventually, she went insane. In her delusions, she divorced her husband, resumed her maiden name, and married into English aristocracy. She now insists on being called Lady Smith. And as for children, she imagines that she has a new child every night. Each time I visit her, she says, 'Doctor, I had a baby last night.'" Life had once destroyed her dreams, but in the sunny world of fantasy, all her dreams come true. Tragic? Perhaps. However, her physician told me, "If I could restore her sanity with a wave of my hand, I wouldn't. She is much happier as she is." If some people are so desperate for a sense of importance that they go insane to achieve it, imagine the miracles you and I can accomplish by giving people honest appreciation. One of the first Americans to earn a salary of over $1 million a year was Charles Schwab, handpicked by Andrew Carnegie to become the first president of U.S. Steel in 1921 at the age of 38. Schwab later left U.S. Steel to rebuild Bethlehem Steel into one of the most profitable companies in America. Why did Andrew Carnegie pay Schwab more than $1 million a year? Was Schwab a genius? Number, did he know more about steel than others did? Number, Schwab himself admitted that he had many employees who knew more about steel than he did. Schwab earned his salary largely because of his ability to manage people. He once shared his secret in his own words, words that should be inscribed on every school, office, and home in the country. "I consider my ability to arouse enthusiasm among my people to be my greatest asset. The best way to develop the best in someone is through appreciation and encouragement. Nothing destroys ambition like criticism from superiors. I never criticize anyone. I believe in giving people an incentive to work, so I am always eager to praise and slow to find fault. If I like something, I am hearty in my approval and lavish in my praise. That was Schwab's method. However, what do most people do? The exact opposite. If they dislike something, they criticize. If they like something, they say nothing. As the old saying goes, once I did badly, and that I heard ever. Twice I did well, but that I heard never. Schwab claimed that this approach was one of the main reasons for Andrew Carnegie's phenomenal success. Carnegie made a habit of praising his associates publicly and privately. He even wanted praise on his tombstone, writing his own epitaph. Here lies one who knew how to surround himself with men cleverer than himself. Sincere appreciation was also one of the secrets behind the success of the first John D. Rockefeller. For example, when one of his partners, Edward T. Bedford, lost $1 million on a bad deal in South America, Rockefeller did not criticize him. Instead, he praised Bedford for saving 60% of the money invested. "That's splendid," said Rockefeller. "We don't always do as well as that upstairs." I once came across a story that, while likely fictional, illustrates a valuable point. According to the tale, a farm woman, after a long day's work, set a pile of hay in front of her family at the dinner table. When they angrily demanded to know if she had gone mad, she replied, "How was I to know you'd notice? I've been cooking for you for 20 years, and I've never heard a word to let me know you weren't eating hay." A study on runaway wives revealed that the main reason women left their husbands was a lack of appreciation. I suspect a similar study on runaway husbands would yield the same results. We often take our spouses for granted, never letting them know how much we appreciate them. One class participant shared a story about his wife, who was part of a self-improvement group at their church. She asked her husband to list 6 things she could do to become a better wife. "I was surprised by the request," he said. "It would have been easy to list 6 things I would like to change about her after all. She could have listed 1,000 things she'd like to change about me, but I didn't. Instead, I told her, 'Let me think about it and give you an answer in the morning.' The next morning, I got up early and sent my wife 6 red roses with a note saying, 'I can't think of 6 things I would like to change about you. I love you just the way you are.' When I came home that evening, my wife greeted me at the door, tears in her eyes. I was glad I had not criticized her as she had requested. The following Sunday, after she shared the results of her assignment with her group, several women came up to me and said, "That was the most considerate thing I have ever heard." It was then I realized the power of appreciation. Florence Ziegfeld, the most famous Broadway producer of his time, gained his reputation by glorifying the American girl. Time after time, he transformed ordinary women into glamorous visions of beauty on stage. His appreciation made these women feel beautiful, and he backed it up with action, raising their salaries from $30 a week to as much as $175. On opening night at the Follies, he sent roses to every woman in the cast. Once, I tried fasting for 6 days and nights. Surprisingly, I felt less hungry at the end of the 6th day than at the end of the 2nd. Yet many people would consider it a crime to let their families or employees go without food for 6 days. However, they let them go for 60 days, or even 60 years without the appreciation. They crave almost as much as food. When Alfred Lunt played the leading role in Reunion in Vienna, he remarked, "There is nothing I need as much as nourishment for my self-esteem." We nourish the bodies of our children, friends, and employees, but we often neglect to nourish their self-esteem. We provide them with food, but we fail to give them the kind words of appreciation that would stay with them for years. Paul Harvey, in one of his radio broadcasts titled "The Rest of the Story," shared how appreciation can change a life. He told the story of a Detroit teacher who asked a blind boy named Stevie Morris to help her find a mouse in the classroom. This was the first time anyone had acknowledged Stevie's extraordinary sense of hearing. From that moment on, Stevie developed his gift and grew up to become the famous musician Stevie Wonder. Some readers may be thinking, flattery? I've tried that, and it doesn't work with intelligent people. Of course, flattery rarely works with discerning individuals. It is shallow, selfish, and insincere. True appreciation, on the other hand, comes from the heart. The difference between appreciation and flattery is simple. One is sincere, the other is not. One comes from the heart, the other from the teeth. One is admired, the other is despised. At Chapultepec Palace in Mexico City, a bust of General Álvaro Obregón bears this inscription: "Don't be afraid of enemies who attack you. Be afraid of friends who flatter you." No, I am not suggesting flattery. I am proposing a new way of life, one built on genuine appreciation. King George V had 6 maxims displayed on the walls of his study. One of them read, "Teach me neither to offer nor receive cheap praise." That is all. Flattery is cheap praise. As someone once said, flattery is telling the other person exactly what they think about themselves. Ralph Waldo Emerson said, "Use what language you will, you can never say anything but what you are." If flattery were all it took, everyone would be an expert in human relations. However, flattery is a counterfeit that eventually leads to trouble. When we stop thinking about ourselves for a moment and focus on the good qualities of others, we will not need to resort to flattery. True appreciation will naturally follow. One of the most neglected virtues in daily life is appreciation. We often fail to praise our children for a good report card, or encourage them when they succeed in a small task. Nothing pleases a child more than a parent's approval. The next time you enjoy a meal at a restaurant, take a moment to thank the chef. If a tired salesperson treats you with kindness, express your appreciation. Every public speaker knows the discouragement of addressing an audience without receiving a single word of praise. The same applies to workers in offices, factories, and homes. Everyone, regardless of his or her role, hungers for appreciation. Leave a trail of gratitude in your daily life, and you will be amazed at how it ignites flames of friendship. Pamela Dunham of Connecticut once supervised a janitor who was performing poorly. The other employees mocked him, and productivity suffered. Pamela decided to praise him whenever he did something right, and gradually his performance improved. Soon, he was doing an excellent job. Honest appreciation succeeded where criticism had failed. There is an old saying I've pasted on my mirror, where I can see it every day. I shall pass this way but once. Any good, therefore, that I can do, or any kindness I can show, let me do it now. Let me not defer nor neglect it, or I shall not pass this way again. Emerson said, "Every man I meet is my superior in some way. In that, I learn from him." If this was true of Emerson, it is even truer for you and me. Let us stop thinking about our own accomplishments and focus on the good points of others. Forget flattery. Give honest, sincere appreciation. Be hearty in your approbation and lavish in your praise. And people will remember your words for years, repeating them long after you have forgotten. Principle 2. Give honest and sincere appreciation. He who can do this has the whole world with him. He who cannot walks a lonely way. I often went fishing during the summers in Maine. Personally, I have a great liking for strawberries and cream. However, I discovered that, for some strange reason, fish prefer worms. Therefore, when I went fishing, I did not think about what I wanted. I thought about what the fish wanted. I did not bait the hook with strawberries and cream. Instead, I dangled a worm or grasshopper in front of the fish and asked, "Wouldn't you like to have that?" Why not apply the same common sense when it comes to dealing with people? That is what Lloyd George, the Prime Minister of Great Britain during World War I, did. When asked how he managed to stay in power after the other wartime leaders, Wilson, Orlando, and Clemenceau, had faded from the public eye, he responded that if there was one thing to which he could attribute his success, it was his ability to bait the hook to suit the fish. Why waste time talking about what we want? That is juvenile and absurd. Sure, you are interested in what you want, just as you should be. You are always and eternally interested in what you want. However, no one else is. The rest of us are just like you, interested in what we want. Therefore, the only way on earth to influence other people is to talk about what they want and show them how to get it. Keep that in mind tomorrow when you want someone to do something for you. If, for instance, you want to stop your children from smoking, do not lecture or preach to them, and do not talk about what you want. Instead, show them how cigarettes might hinder their ability to make the basketball team or win the 100-yard dash. This principle applies to more than just children. It applies to anyone, including calves and chimpanzees. For example, Ralph Waldo Emerson and his son once tried to get a calf into the barn. They made the mistake of thinking only about what they wanted. Emerson pushed while his son pulled, but the calf, thinking only of what it wanted, stiffened its legs and refused to move. An Irish house cleaner, observing the situation, had more calf sense than Emerson did. She considered what the calf wanted, so she stuck her finger in its mouth and let it suckle as she led it into the barn. Every action you have taken since the day you were born has been driven by something you wanted. Even when you gave a large donation to the Red Cross, you did it because you wanted something, perhaps the satisfaction of doing something noble or unselfish. Inasmuch as ye have done it unto one of the least of these, my brethren, ye have done it unto me. If you had not wanted the feeling that your donation provided more than you wanted to hold on to the money, you would not have contributed. Even if you donated out of a sense of obligation or because a customer asked you to, the truth remains, you wanted something in return. Harry A. Overstreet, in his insightful book Influencing Human Behavior, said, "Action springs out of what we fundamentally desire, and the best piece of advice to would-be persuaders, whether in business, home, school, or politics, is this. First, arouse in the other person an eager want. He who can do this has the whole world with him. He who cannot walks a lonely way." Andrew Carnegie, a poor Scotch boy who started working for 2 cents an hour and eventually gave away $365 million, learned early on that the only way to influence people is to speak in terms of what they want. Despite attending school for only 4 years, he became a master at handling people. For instance, his sister-in-law was extremely worried about her 2 boys at Yale. The boys were so preoccupied with their lives that they neglected to write home or respond to their mother's letters. Carnegie bet $100 that he could get a response from them by return mail without even asking for it. He wrote the boys a chatty letter, mentioning casually in a postscript that he was enclosing a $5 bill for each of them. However, he intentionally neglected to include the money. As expected, back came replies by return mail, thanking their dear Uncle Andrew for his kind letter. Another example of persuasive influence comes from Stan Novak of Cleveland, Ohio, a participant in our course. One evening, Stan returned home from work to find his youngest son, Tim, kicking and screaming on the living room floor. Tim was protesting because he was supposed to start kindergarten the next day, and he absolutely refused to go. Ordinarily, Stan's reaction would have been to scold him, and insist that he had no choice but to attend. However, recognizing that this approach would not be effective, Stan sat down and thought, "If I were Tim, what would make me excited about going to kindergarten?" He and his wife compiled a list of fun activities that Tim would experience at kindergarten, such as finger painting, singing songs, and making new friends. They then set those activities into motion, starting a finger painting session on the kitchen table. Soon, Tim, who had initially resisted, was peeking around the corner and eventually joined in the fun. "Oh no," they told him, "you have to go to kindergarten first to learn how to finger paint." By talking to Tim in terms he understood, the family's enthusiasm aroused an eager want in him. The next morning, Stan discovered Tim already sitting in the living room chair, ready to go to kindergarten, eager not to be late. Tomorrow, when you aim to persuade someone, take a moment to pause and ask yourself, "How can I make this person want to do what I'm asking?" This simple question will prevent you from charging into situations thoughtlessly, speaking only of your own desires. Once, I rented the grand ballroom of a New York hotel for a series of lectures. At the start of one season, I was suddenly informed that the rent would nearly triple. This news came after tickets had been printed and announcements made. Naturally, I did not want to pay the increase, but I realized that arguing about what I wanted would be futile. Instead, I approached the hotel manager and acknowledged that, from his perspective, the rent increase made sense. Together, we listed the advantages and disadvantages of enforcing the rent hike. I pointed out that while freeing up the ballroom for dances and conventions would bring in more money, insisting on the rent hike would ultimately reduce their income since I would be forced to hold the lectures elsewhere. Additionally, I highlighted that my lectures brought crowds of educated, cultured people to the hotel, which was valuable advertising. After considering both sides, the manager agreed to only a 50% increase instead of 300%. And this was achieved without me saying a word about what I wanted. What if I had stormed into his office, demanded an explanation, and refused to pay the increase? The situation would have escalated into an argument. And even if I had convinced him of my point, his pride might have prevented him from backing down. Henry Ford wisely said, "If there is any one secret of success, it lies in the ability to get the other person's point of view and see things from that person's angle as well as from your own." This truth, so often ignored, is essential for success in human relationships. Tomorrow, look at the letters that arrive on your desk, and you will see that most of them violate this principle. For instance, a letter from the head of the radio department of an advertising agency boasted about the agency's success without ever addressing the recipient's concerns, ultimately failing to engage them. In contrast, a superintendent from a large freight terminal wrote a letter to one of his customers, Edward Vermeulen, explaining how late deliveries were causing delays. However, the letter initially focused on the terminal's problems, which did not resonate with Vermeulen. Upon revision, the letter was rewritten to focus on how early deliveries would benefit the customer by reducing delays and ensuring prompt service, thus making it far more effective. Barbara Anderson, a bank employee, successfully secured job interviews with 11 out of 12 banks in Phoenix by focusing on how her skills could benefit them rather than her own needs. Her letter emphasized how she could contribute to their growth and profitability, which made her an attractive candidate. The lesson is clear. If you can arouse in others an eager want, you will succeed. As William Winter once remarked, self-expression is the dominant necessity of human nature. Let others stir the pot themselves, and they'll not only like the idea, but also take ownership of it. Remember, first, arouse in the other person an eager want. He who can do this has the whole world with him. He who cannot walks a lonely way. Do this, and you'll be welcome anywhere. Why should you read this book to learn how to win friends? Why not observe the technique of the greatest friend maker the world has ever known? Who is this remarkable figure? You may encounter him tomorrow while walking down the street. As you come within 10 feet of him, he'll begin wagging his tail. If you stop and pat him, he'll almost leap out of his skin, overwhelmed with joy to show his affection for you. And the best part? You know that behind this display of affection, there are no hidden agendas. He's not trying to sell you real estate or marry you. Have you ever paused to consider that a dog is the only animal that doesn't need to work for a living? A hen must lay eggs, a cow produces milk, and a canary sings. But a dog makes his living by offering only love. When I was 5 years old, my father bought a little yellow-haired puppy for 50 cents. That puppy became the light of my childhood. Every afternoon around 4:30, he would sit in the front yard, his beautiful eyes steadfastly watching the path. As soon as he heard my voice, or saw me swinging my dinner pail through the brush, he would shoot up the hill, racing breathlessly to greet me with leaps of joy and barks of pure happiness. Tippy, as we called him, was my constant companion for 5 years. Then, one tragic night, I will never forget it, he was killed just 10 feet away from where I stood, struck by lightning. Tippy's death was the greatest sorrow of my boyhood. Tippy never read a book on psychology, but he didn't need to. He seemed to know by some divine instinct that you can make more friends in 2 months by becoming genuinely interested in other people than in 2 years by trying to get people interested in you. Let me emphasize that. You can make more friends in 2 months by showing genuine interest in others than by trying to make them interested in you for 2 years. Yet we both know people who stumble through life trying to get others to focus on them. And of course, it doesn't work. People aren't interested in you or me. They are interested in themselves, morning, noon, and night. The New York Telephone Company conducted a detailed study of telephone conversations to determine which word is the most frequently used. You've guessed it, it's the personal pronoun I. The word I was used 3,900 times in 500 conversations. When you see a group photograph that includes you, whose face do you look for first? If we merely try to impress others and get them to be interested in us, we will never have many sincere friends. True friendships aren't built that way. Napoleon attempted this method, and in his last meeting with Josephine, he confessed, "Josephine, I have been as fortunate as any man, but at this moment, you are the only person in the world I can rely on." And even then, historians doubt whether he could rely on her. Alfred Adler, the famous Viennese psychologist, wrote a book called What Life Should Mean to You. In it, he states, "The person who is not interested in his fellow man has the greatest difficulties in life and causes the most harm to others. It is from these individuals that all human failures stem." You could read numerous academic works on psychology without finding a statement more profound for you and me. Adler's words are so meaningful that I must repeat them. The person who is not interested in his fellow man has the greatest difficulties in life and causes the most harm to others. It is from such individuals that all human failures stem. During a course I took on short story writing at New York University, the editor of a prominent magazine visited our class. He mentioned that he could pick up any story that crossed his desk and, after reading just a few paragraphs, determine whether the author liked people. If the author doesn't like people, he said, then people won't like their stories. This hard-nosed editor stopped twice during his lecture to apologize for sounding like he was preaching. But he emphasized, "You must be interested in people if you want to be a successful writer of stories." If this is true for writing fiction, it certainly applies to interacting with people face to face. One evening, I had the privilege of spending time in the dressing room of Howard Thurston during his last performance on Broadway. Thurston was the undisputed dean of magicians. For 40 years, he traveled the globe, mystifying audiences and creating illusions. More than 60 million people had paid to see his show, and he earned almost $2 million. I asked him to reveal the secret of his success. It wasn't his education. He had run away from home as a boy, become a hobo, and learned to read by watching signs from boxcars. Nor was it his superior knowledge of magic. Many knew as much about the craft as he did. What set him apart, however, was his personality. He was a master showman, a keen student of human nature, and he carefully rehearsed every gesture, voice inflection, and eyebrow raise down to the split second. But above all, Thurston was genuinely interested in people. Many magicians viewed their audience as a group of fools to be duped. Thurston, on the other hand, said to himself before each performance, "I am grateful that these people come to see me. They allow me to make a living doing what I love, and I am going to give them the best show I can." Thurston repeated this mantra to himself before every show. "I love my audience. I love my audience." Absurd? Perhaps, but this mindset contributed to his success. George Dyke, from North Warren, Pennsylvania, also discovered the value of genuine interest in others. After retiring from his service station business, Dyke found himself bored and took up playing the fiddle. He began attending music events, engaging with musicians, and learning about their backgrounds. Though not a skilled fiddler himself, Dyke became well known among country music fans as Uncle George, the fiddle scraper from Kinzua County. By taking a genuine interest in others, he created a new and fulfilling chapter in his life. Theodore Roosevelt's immense popularity can also be attributed to his genuine interest in others, even his servants. His valet, James E. Amos, wrote a book, Theodore Roosevelt, Hero to His Valet, in which he recalled Roosevelt calling his wife one day to tell her about a bird outside her window. Just a simple, kind gesture. Roosevelt had a way of making everyone feel noticed and important. One day, when he visited the White House while President and Mrs. Taft were away, he greeted every servant by name, including the scullery maids, and even asked about the kitchen maid's cornbread, showing how much he valued the people others might overlook. Edward M. Sykes, Jr., a sales representative from Chatham, New Jersey, found out just how impactful it can be to show a genuine interest in others. One day, a customer refused to buy Johnson & Johnson products from him. Disheartened, Sykes returned to his car, driving around the town for a while before deciding to give it one more shot. When he walked back into the store, he greeted the soda clerk and sales clerk warmly. To his surprise, the owner greeted him with a smile and doubled his usual order. The owner explained that the soda clerk had vouched for Sykes, pointing out how he always took the time to say hello to the staff, something few other salespeople did. I've learned from my own experiences that taking a genuine interest in people opens doors that would otherwise remain shut. Years ago, I taught a course in fiction writing at the Brooklyn Institute of Arts and Sciences. We wanted to invite distinguished authors like Kathleen Norris, Fannie Hurst, Ida Tarbell, Albert Payson Terhune, and Rupert Hughes to share their experiences with us. We wrote them letters expressing admiration for their work and our interest in learning from them. Busy as they were, these authors took the time to travel to Brooklyn to help us, because we showed genuine interest in them and their methods. The same principle applies to all walks of life. Whether you're a factory worker, a clerk, or even a king, people will respond to your genuine interest. Consider the German Kaiser. At the end of World War I, he was probably the most hated man on earth. His nation had turned against him, and he fled to Holland to save his life. Amid the fury, one little boy wrote him a simple letter, expressing his unwavering admiration. The Kaiser was so moved by the letter that he invited the boy and his mother to visit. and eventually married the boy's mother. If you want to win friends, you must be willing to make sacrifices for others, investing time, energy, and thoughtfulness. When the Duke of Windsor was Prince of Wales, he spent months learning Spanish in preparation for a tour of South America, wanting to speak to people in their own language. They adored him for it. I used to go out of my way to learn my friends' birthdays, asking them about their birth dates, and memorizing them to send a thoughtful note or card. Such small gestures can have a lasting impact. If you answer the phone tomorrow, greet the caller with enthusiasm and genuine interest. Companies train their employees to do this because it makes customers feel valued, creating loyalty. A letter published by the National Bank of North America shares a story of one depositor who remained loyal because the staff treated her with warmth and concern during her mother's illness. Taking an interest in others doesn't just benefit you, it can change their lives. Martin Ginsburg, who attended one of our courses, shared how a nurse's kindness on Thanksgiving Day transformed his experience. He was 10 years old, in a hospital awaiting major surgery, feeling alone and scared. A young nurse stayed with him long past her shift, playing games and comforting him, making a world of difference to a boy in need. If you want to make lasting friendships, if you want to help others and yourself, keep this principle in mind. Principle 1. Become genuinely interested in other people. A simple way to make a good impression. At a dinner party in New York, one of the guests, a woman who had inherited wealth, was eager to make a good impression on others. She had spent a fortune on luxurious items such as sables, diamonds, and pearls. Yet, she had done nothing about her facial expression, which reflected sourness and selfishness. She didn't realize a fact everyone knows. The expression one carries on their face matters more than the clothes one wears on their back. Charles Schwab once told me that his smile was worth $1 million, and he was likely understating the truth. Schwab's personality, charm, and his ability to make people like him were almost entirely responsible for his success. His captivating smile was one of the most delightful aspects of his character. Actions often speak louder than words, and a smile conveys, "I like you. You make me happy. I'm glad to see you." That is why dogs make such a positive impression. They seem so thrilled to see us, almost leaping out of their skin. Naturally, we're pleased to see them. A baby's smile has the same impact. Have you ever sat in a doctor's waiting room and observed the sullen faces of people waiting to be seen? Dr. Stephen K. Sproul, a veterinarian from Raytown, Missouri, shared a story about one spring day when his waiting room was packed with clients waiting to have their pets inoculated. No one spoke, and it was clear they'd rather be elsewhere than wasting time in that office. He recounted how a young woman entered with a baby and a kitten. She sat next to a frustrated gentleman. Unexpectedly, the baby smiled at the man. And what did he do? The same thing you or I would do, he smiled back. Soon, they began talking about the baby and his grandchildren, and shortly after, the entire waiting room was engaged, turning a tense situation into a pleasant one. An insincere grin does not work, it is mechanical, and people resent it. I am referring to a genuine, heartwarming smile that comes from within. This type of smile has real value. Professor James V. McConnell from the University of Michigan noted that people who smile tend to manage, teach, and sell more effectively, raising happier children. Smiles convey more information than frowns, which is why encouragement is a more effective teaching tool than punishment. The employment manager of a large New York department store once told me she would prefer hiring a pleasant smiling sales clerk without formal education over a highly educated person with a somber face. The effect of a smile is even felt over the phone. U.S. telephone companies offer a program called Phone Power, advising employees to smile while speaking on the phone as it comes through in their voice. Robert Cryer, a manager in Cincinnati, Ohio, shared how a smile in his voice helped him hire a PhD candidate for a challenging-to-fill position. The candidate, despite receiving multiple offers from larger companies, chose Cryer's firm because the warmth in his voice made him feel genuinely valued. A business leader shared with me that people rarely succeed unless they enjoy their work. He did not believe in the old adage that hard work alone unlocks the door to success. He had known many who thrived because they found joy in their business. When the fun stopped, their success dwindled. If you do not enjoy meeting people, they will not enjoy meeting you. I have asked many business people to smile at someone every hour for a week and return to share their results. William B. Steinhardt, a New York stockbroker, wrote about his experiment with smiles. He had been married for 18 years and rarely smiled at his wife or spoke much before leaving for work. After trying out my suggestion, he noticed significant changes at home and in his office, where smiles brought him better outcomes. One morning, Steinhardt greeted his wife with a smile, which shocked her. He began smiling at others too, like the elevator operator, the door attendant, and even his colleagues on the stock exchange floor, where he had never been known to smile. Soon, everyone smiled back. He noticed even complaints were handled more smoothly. Don't feel like smiling? Force yourself to. Whistle or hum if you are alone. As psychologist William James stated, action seems to follow feeling, but really, action and feeling go together. By controlling the action, you indirectly influence the feeling. Happiness is not dependent on external factors. It depends on internal conditions. Two people in the same place can feel differently because of their mindset. Shakespeare said, "There is nothing either good or bad, but thinking makes it so." And Lincoln wisely observed, "Most folks are about as happy as they make up their minds to be." Once, as I climbed the stairs of a Long Island Railroad station, I saw a group of crippled boys on crutches, struggling but laughing with joy. It was an inspiring reminder that happiness is an internal choice. Maria Gonzalez from Guadalajara, Mexico, was working in isolation but envied her co-workers' camaraderie. She decided to change her approach and started greeting people with a smile. Her life at work transformed as her acquaintances became friends. Elbert Hubbard once advised, "When you step outside, lift your chin, carry your head high, fill your lungs with fresh air, and greet people with a smile. Do not waste time worrying about enemies or misunderstandings. Keep your mind on your goals, and you'll find opportunities presenting themselves as the days go by." The Chinese have a saying, "A man without a smiling face must not open a shop." Your smile is a messenger of goodwill. For those who have faced a day filled with frowns and scowls, your smile can be like sunshine breaking through clouds. Years ago, a New York department store shared a message during the Christmas rush, recognizing the stress their clerks were under. A smile costs nothing but creates so much. It enriches those who receive it without impoverishing the giver. It happens in an instant, but can be remembered forever. No one is too rich to do without it, and no one too poor to be enriched by it.